Welcome to the Fight for Our Existence podcast. I'm your host, Uncle Fox Matone, and today I'm here with my Uncle Wendsler. We're here in San Carlos. My Uncle Wendsler Nosie. He's an advocate for Mount Graham and Oak Flat, and I finally got a chance to. I finally caught my uncle here. A lot of when I first started this, I'd been telling people Uncle this, Uncle that, and everybody kept asking me, well, "What uncle are you talking about?" So I finally got my uncle here. How you doing, Uncle?
Hey, I'm doing good, Matone. It's good to be with you today.
Oh yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time. For doing this, and I know you've been out of state and working with other organizations for Oak Flat, and so I just want to, catch up and see how things are going, and just talk about personally how you got into this fighting for land and water.
Oh, okay. No, that sounds good. No, thanks again for the interest, and I know there's a big interest out there, especially with the fight that we're in. So it's good to be with your listeners today.
Oh, thank you very much. And again, we had the big fire that just happened not too long ago, and so everybody was kind of trying to work things out. But it seemed like today everything has been going really well with the fire and donations and things like that.
Yeah, no, it's been really good. When you think about the first responders, but not only that, the people really all pitching in and doing what they needed to do. Yes, it was real horrible, and I mean to see so many things lost, and from the homes and to the environment itself. But like we always say, there's always a reason for things that happen like that, and we just need to find the best out of it. And it should prepare the tribe for the future. As we look at climate changes and things that that we really need to take care within the reservation and also outside. So it does give us an evaluation of looking at what we should do in the future.
And I was telling people about the fire, and I told them a long time ago when it first was the reservation when it first established, they called the cavalry called it the 40 acres of hell, just because how bad this land was. And I always tell people they did that because they didn't think we were going to last that long. To get rid of us, they put us on bad land. Just being in this kind of land, and you growing up in, have you seen a lot of changes with the land here in San Carlos Reservation or anything?
Well, when you go back to those days, and you think of your mother, your grandparents, and what they had talked about, there was a lot of promises from the federal government about how they're going to fulfill the needs of the people as we would go forward. And come to realize that a lot of those promises they made never came to fruition. We're talking about like really water development, pertaining to the land, what we could actually grow and what we could have, and then free electricity, and all these promises that were made never came to fruition. So it put the tribe in a really between two rocks of what we're going to do, and what does it mean doing something without revenue.
Yeah. And
so, but again, you come to today when you look at the climate changes that are happening, just like me and so many others, we can remember all the snow that we're still in the rim of the mountains, that would even take us as close as into May. But now those things no longer exist.
Yeah.
And also the number of floods that we used to get with, the abundance of water. And so, it really has changed. But not only that, people tend to forget that we have mines that surround us, and there's a lot of dewatering that's going on, and that they pull pockets of water, groundwater, and so I don't know, when you look at it from a really environmental way of looking at it, there's some big obstacles we're facing because of what we're doing as humans affecting everything around us. So I think we really, as I said earlier, we really need to evaluate and look at data that we have gathered through the years, and then I really believe that's going to help us look to the future of what we need to do.
And that's what when we talk about the land and water, I always tell everybody that my side of the family in California, we're come from a family of miners, and I know hearing from stories that you also, our family also, you live here on a res, but you had to go certain areas because your father or uncles were miners.
No, well, yeah, it's very true. When you come back to, I can only talk about my family. So, when I talk about my father, the story about my father is that when he was trying to get a job with the tribe, he only spoke full Apache, and so the requirement at that time was you had to be able to read and write English, and so many of the Apaches were turned away. And then for other jobs outside the res was somewhat difficult to get, but if you had an opportunity, those two were still required. And so where it left a lot of our people was to mine, and so they had no choice at that time. And so I just remember, my mother talking about my father coming up and saying, like, we really need to teach our kids and he was talking about being oppressed,
Yes.
in both worlds. And so, from that, he had to do some mining, and until he got sick, through cancer from the mines, and that's how he, passed when he was 39 years old. And so that what really woke up the family. What the jobs he had was affecting all of us, because a lot of my siblings were getting sick, and
Yeah.
my mother also passed from cancer. And so, it's just an ugly era of our people
Yeah.
of the time. And, not just our family, but many of the people. But again, the sad thing is we don't really talk about that, and we really need to have a discussion about what's happening around us.
Yeah, because in California at Elim, my grandfather too had passed away with stomach cancer, and they all worked at the mine just because it's dangerous. So these companies want to put these natives in there because it's too dangerous for them, and they would send them in there and do all the mining. And they need the money. I mean, they can't get not have the education, and so I mean, what else they're supposed to do to help to feed the family? And I feel like that happened here too, because I always hear stories about people having dynamite just because they really didn't care for the Apaches, just give them whatever they can and to go mining. And so they just had all this dangerous mining dynamite here, and it's just, I don't think they really cared. And now today is affecting us today.
Yeah, and what's really crazy about the whole thing is that like, for instance, this fight has taken me, across the ocean and back east, and I said with so many people, and even in the town of Globe, which is 20 miles away from us. Let me start there. I had a friend of mine that I graduated with, and so when I began to fight for the water, the land, the environment, the future of the Southwest, about how it's going to be destroyed by mining, and how, in some cases it offended some of the white people because, that's kind of their career, and that's what they brought here. But I had this one, not using his name, but one of my friends that I graduated with told me, he says, Wendsler, he goes, there's a lot of us white people that support you, because what they don't tell, or stories that are not told, is that a lot of our people, white people, he said, are buried in these grounds too. He said, because of mining. He said a lot of the American people that migrated from the east to the west didn't know how to read or write. And so when this territory was young, and the miners were here, they were putting all these people to work directly with mercury. And so he said that's been a tragic part of the history of mining. He said, but you can go as far back to the other side of the world, and you see how they're misusing a lot of people in suppressed areas. So when you look at the reservation and us Native people being captive and put as prisoners of war, that's how they look at us. They looked at us as human beings, well, not as human beings, to be used in the way they wanted to, and then we're gone. And so this issue is a really big issue from way back when to where this country had been developed, and then now where we sit as Indian people.
Yeah, because it starts from way back. I mean, like today when I went through Globe, I think about how you and the family, some of the stores that we passed today, you couldn't go in those stores, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. So like when we also do Oak Flat, everybody's there, and then I tell everybody, when you guys all leave, it's my family that has to deal with the town and whoever is against them for fighting land and water. They're here every day doing that. It's not an annual thing, and then. So are you surprised, feel the same way when you go through Globe, Miami, things that you seen when you were younger?
Well, I would have definitely felt the same way if we weren't doing what we're doing today. Because what we're doing today is really educating, the non-Indian community and making them realize the environmental impacts,
Yeah.
and then how it leads to the health issue that they're facing.
Mm-hmm.
And then being that, us Apaches are native people, we shouldn't be afraid to say what we want to say because we have the right.
Right.
Because we can evaluate how this country has changed, especially in our area. So the point I'm trying to make is that, when you had the first pioneers that come in, they monopolized everything. And that's
Yeah.
why I'm saying when other people came back east, they were used to their advantage. And for us Apaches, what we forgot was that all the way up to 1974, there were still signs that said dogs and cats and Indians stay out. So there were a lot of places
Yeah.
that did not serve, and our people had to go to the back door and buy food if they were going to do that.
Yeah.
So when I come back to my mother, and not just my mother, there was a lot of people her age that would be parked here and there, and they were picnicking, they were eating their food. And so my mother always reminded me that we eat this way because those people never wanted us in the stores. And so she said, I would never go to those stores for them or restaurants to treat me this way.
Yeah.
And so, I guess the tragic thing is that sometimes either we don't share or we don't tell the story of what our elders and those before them went through. And so, growing up in high school was the same thing. There was a lot of, in the late 50s and early 60s, there were a lot of good basketball players, athletes, but they never really had the opportunity to really play, in these prejudiced areas like in the town of Globe. And so we had to really embark in breaking these ugly attitudes, and behaviors towards, the people here in San Carlos. And it took a lot of people to stand up, and it's sad to say that those stories aren't told.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of people who laid the groundwork, for us to be able to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, I go back to, what we've been doing, fighting for Mount Graham over 40 years and, now Oak Flats.
Yeah.
And, I see the little changes. Well, there is some little changes because when we go through the town of Globe, there's a lot of whispers that we support you.
Yeah.
We know that this is your land. This was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We know that the water's going to be destroyed. We know that the mines don't care about us.
Yeah.
But, the sad thing is that that's coming from the people who are oppressed. But then, you have the Chamber of Commerce and everybody threatening the businesses there if you have anything to do with, the Apache Stronghold, we're not going to go to your stores. And so these are the untold stories, that is really happening. So, I'm proud. I'm proud because, we're breaking the barriers of this reservation, the San Carlos, and reminding people that we came from these important areas that God touched the world for us. And even though we get ridiculed for it, it's okay because just unfortunately that they don't know the story, it wasn't shared with them, or either I would have to say when you get assimilated, when you fall into the propaganda of the American dream, then they tend to forget who they are, which isn't their fault because the old people used to say that what they brought here was an easy life, easy world, but it's going to destroy the very fabric that God made things from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, things that are made from the earth that God created.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the conflict that's going on right now.
We earlier just said that, eating from from outside, and I think about, I remember even in California, we eat outside the grocery store. Like, why are we eating out here for? Why are we eating why we stop at a gas station to eat our food from the restaurant? Like, I never realized that's why. Yeah, it happened a lot. I mean, growing up, I remember eating outside the grocery store, outside the restaurant, but I thought that was cool. I don't know. I didn't realize that's where it came from. Now when you say it, now that all makes sense.
Yeah, because we went through the same thing that African Americans went through.
Yeah.
It's just our story's not told,
Yeah.
And again, that's really sad because, I know if the older ones were alive today and they see us doing what we're doing, they would really shake their head and say, what happened to our children?
Yeah.
They don't even know how much we suffered and what they've done to us.
Yeah.
And that's really telling me, be who I am.
Yeah.
Do what I can and stand for the right things that we are as Indian people.
Yeah.
And never let them degrade me,
Mm-hmm.
and because it was all wrong. And that's why I say across this country, that the United States really sits on a false foundation.
Yeah.
Because this country didn't come to be in the right manner.
Yeah.
It was all done wrong. It was all stolen. And so, I always tell people that hopefully, I'm not offending you out there. I'm just telling you the truth, and you look it up. Because why are those of us who do this kind of work hated to protect the water, to protect the land, to protect the animals, and protect you? I don't get it. How can they hate me for that?
It always seems like hearing stories and even seeing newspapers, you've always people don't know. The people today don't know as much as I know. Like for me, I know you, my Uncle Wendsler, as one of the best basketball players in the family, and that's how inside the family the reputation is at my age group. And I always remember you playing basketball in Globe, and I remember news clippings of you, and I feel like that's the first time I've ever seen like you in the news, like an Apache in a newspaper, playing basketball, and it just seemed like that determination led to what it is today for you and your family.
It would. Yeah, you're right. But it's like a combination of a lot of different things.
Yeah.
First of all, I go back to when I was a young boy and listened to my grandfather, my uncle, my dad. Before my dad passed, he passed when I was 7 years old, and but they would be intoxicated. They would be crying and saying that they wanted to go home. And then as I got a little bit older, I would ask my mother, "What do you mean? What do they mean about going home?" And that's when she would tell me, "You're Chiricahua. This is where you came from. This is what." She briefly told me, didn't really fully told me because I was young at that point. And then my brothers, my brothers and my sisters, because I come from a family of 7, and I'm the youngest. And my mother always pushed them to work hard, do what they can, be good at what you're going to do. And then, having that many in front of me, siblings, they really pushed me and told me I had to be 3 or 4 times better. And I never, at that point, I never really got it. And then, when I got into junior high, when things really started to come together for me in sports, and just seeing the amount of people, at the Burdett Hall packing the gym when we were the Rice Warriors.
Yeah.
And, everybody's so excited because all the teams, we're winning, we're beating schools. And then the people would come up to me and say, "Man, I'm sure glad you beat Globe, glad you beat Miami, I'm glad you beat Superior, I'm glad you beat, Sanford." And you can just see the expressions and all the people so excited, and it really, began to build you. But when I got home, my mother reminded me that these places were stolen from us.
Yeah.
they were taken from us,
Yeah.
And so my mother would feed me, one point of view.
Yeah.
And then my brothers on this side would say, everybody here in San Carlos, we have a clan.
Yeah.
And the clan we come from is not the majority.
Yeah.
And then my older brother Paul used to tell me, if you're going to make anything here in San Carlos, it's even critical that you work twice as hard.
Yeah.
And be the best you can be. So I really felt like my brothers really mold me. And then I started to understand that, it wasn't like really sports either. It was about change. It was about having a brown person out in front.
Yeah.
And then your dad, Thomas Brown, in California, when he used to take me to the what do you call those playgrounds?
YMCA.
The YMCA, And he used to take me there, and he used to put me with a bunch of African Americans and Chinese, and man, he used to work me. He used to make me run the mountain, and he used to tell me that, Wendsler, you got to do this, you got to do that. When you get back to, in school, you got to make a name of yourself. You got to try to get to the Olympics, be the first Indian, all this stuff. And even him was building me, because, I'll get to the end of it. But it really made me work to really think about what I was doing, even at that young age. And when I went to Globe, it's the first time that I've really felt being an Indian, not an Apache, not a Chiricahua yet.
Yeah.
Because the question the kids were asking me in Globe was, what is it like to live out there? What is it like to be you?
Yeah.
And then the hardcore non-Indian kids were saying, hey, you guys are in prison down there. You guys are not supposed to be out here, because the kids in Globe were wondering about us too. So they kind of, hiddenly leaked us what their parents, grandparents were saying about us.
Yeah.
So then I start putting the 2 and 2 together that, okay, it's something bigger than what I thought. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I remember, my freshman year, my brothers would tell me, and even your dad would tell me that I would have to do something very impressive.
Yeah.
And it really started with grabbing the rim. And I remember when I was in 8th grade, after 8th grade, during 8th grade basketball season, I had my mother take me to Globe High School to watch the game. And my mother was really upset with me because she was like, why are we sitting here watching these freshmen and JV and varsity? They're a bunch of white kids. What are we doing here? And I was telling her, Mom, I got to learn. Just, So anyway, I was watching the freshmen, sophomores and juniors because when I come up, I'm going to have to deal with them.
Yeah.
And so... So one thing I noticed was none of the guards could touch the rim.
Yeah.
So, man, I worked that summer hard to, grab the rim. And finally, when we were freshman year, when we started, the 4 coaches were in the gym, and I had my friends hold my book. They looked at me and said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to grab the rim. They go, grab the rim? What for? I said, here, just hold my books. And so ran up, and I grabbed the rim, and I choked it. And about a week later, when I was sitting down in the locker room, the first coach came up to me and said, hey, do you play ball? I said, yeah, I play ball. Mm-hmm. And he would say, well, make sure you come out. And that's where it started, And, one of the best basketball players came out of Globe and then played varsity football. I played football as a quarterback, so I had a chance to go to the University of Baylor for a defensive back and had a chance for ASU walk-on. So, but then it hit me, I guess this is the end of the story, that I didn't know there was like discrimination. I didn't know that my brother Paul, my brother Carlos, all his age of people were going through all this discrimination. Mm-hmm. And somebody had to break the barrier,
Yeah.
And I guess they were setting me up for it, And my mother on one side telling me the ugliness of how people were disrespecting us and what they took from us. And then on this side, my brothers and everybody telling me I got to be 2-3 times better. And then really seeing, I guess, like a rose began to blossom that I seen what they were talking about. And it was a lot bigger, Mm-hmm. It was a lot bigger than what I thought. And I think that's where the people of San Carlos really embraced me. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter what clan they were from, didn't matter, what Apache we were. We used to fill the gymnasium, the football field,
Yeah.
And I became a household name. And like you were saying, I was featured in a lot of magazines. And newspapers and awards I got, that were never really given to Native people. And I was an Arizona Boy Stater. So a lot of things began to open, and but the important part was the non-Indian kids telling me more things.
Yeah.
And even them telling me, oh, Wendsler, why don't you come to our house? But my dad said no, because you're from San Carlos, anyway.
Yeah.
But it really started there to really open my eyes about what prejudice was and how they viewed us and how we're only supposed to stay in the reservation and not go anywhere.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I give a lot to, all the suffering that, I grew up with the older people who are no longer here. My mother, no longer here, my brothers, everybody that had a part of my life, my friends, they all contribute to what I am today.
Yeah.
At that time.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like all of them today too, like, had passed because of cancer, because of the environment. Of what you guys were in. A lot of stuff that was built with houses was asbestos stuff, and even you and Grandma were in the newspaper for, Grandma, your mom built her own house, and it's just a lot of things that it seemed like Grandma was always really into a lot of things, and you kind of just watched her do all that stuff too. I seen her in the newspaper, building her own house. I seen her in the newspaper interviewing how you guys had no water and no house, and it's just like for her to be on there at that time was amazing. I thought after reading it, not too long ago, and I think I shared that article with you. You reading, reading a comic book while she's, sitting in her house.
Yeah, we were talking about, sports and school, but then you come to that part of it, which was really amazing. Like I don't know how many people in San Carlos know, but during the time Marvin Mall Sr. was the chairman of the tribe of San Carlos, my mother was somehow selected, your grandmother.
Yeah.
And in 1962, she spoke in Congress, and she spoke with another African American man, and that was the first time that Congress was having a discussion about the needs for African Americans and Native Americans. And for the African Americans, that's kind of where it kicked off what you call the homes in the towns and cities. Well, anyway, for the African Americans, it started, where they began to put money in. And then for us Native people, it started from my mother. When she was picked throughout this whole country, and San Carlos got a chance to send a representative, and it was her. And she spoke, and I believe like a year after that, the African Americans and Native Americans were awarded money, the first federal homes. And so I don't know if people in San Carlos know or in Arizona, but the first 10 homes built in America for Native Americans was in San Carlos. And my mother was one of them. So that tells you how poor we were. Top 10 out of all the Native Americans in this country. So, what a lot of people don't know was, even though my mother was very traditional and very religious in her way, she was very strong advocate for the wrongdoing to us Apaches and to Native people, that it wasn't right. And, again, like I said, when people wonder, for me, like, well, how did Wendsler ever get there? But I was born into it with a mother, who really despised the treatment, and she was going to do what she could the best way she knew how. And it was always about the children. It was always, if you teach the children right, if you tell them the truth, then they'll know what to do. And I think sometimes we don't do that today with our children. Because the children our children are the ones that are really going to change things for tomorrow. We're the ones that are supposed to learn. We're the ones supposed to take the hit. Then we become good advisors to our own children, what they need to do. So I really feel like in that area of how I got into the government, down the road in my life, really comes from my mother, because of her just witnessing all this wrongdoing.
And I remember she would know, like, who was here and where they should be. Like, they're from this area, or these Apaches are from this area, and I always thought too, when I was younger, that St. Croix is where the Apaches are from. And so, like, today when we talk about Oak Flat, it's like a lot of people don't realize that St. Croix is not our home. It's Oak Flat, all the mountains. And I always get that question, like, oh, you're used to the heat, or used to the, and I remember telling him, like, well, my uncle said, like, we're not dumb. We were in the mountains, when it's summertime. Why would we be out here in a hot summer, walking around like that? So again, like, a lot of people don't realize that this is not where we're not from.
Yeah, and again, that goes back to a lot of different categories. One is, when the United States, funded a lot of federal policies to really assimilate us. And, they've done it in a lot of different ways. And then those that had the potential to really be an advocate for their people were taken away. Were either put in prison or sent off the reservation. And, a lot of those prominent people were taken and were gone. And what some people don't know is that a lot of them were killed. And it took a younger generation of Apaches to try to hang on to the past. But it really helped from the way the policy worked with the government. It really helped the government try to really transform us. But little did they know there were some of them, like one of them, my mother. To keep that way alive and eventually resurface again. And that's the sad part of it, because even in the military records, all you have to do is read the military records. It tells you why they picked San Carlos. It was the worst place to be. And every band of Apaches came from the mountains, from beautiful places. And we were vacated out of there for the needs of America when they were robbing and taking all these places. And that's a sad tragedy, and that's why I stand firm, to make sure, to assure that we're not going to lose places. And really, Mount Graham and Oak Flats is really the last two places, because they've taken everything else. And but that's the struggle that we have today, and the stronghold. We're doing the best we can to help educate, but it's a matter of our people just reaching back to their own families and the families telling them where they originated from, and but really, it's a tragedy, when I look at it, because nobody's writing about it, nobody's doing any stories on it. And if we continue in that way, our kids will assume that they came from San Carlos, and that's what America wants us to understand. And if we give them what they want, then really it's gone. It's all gone.
I mean, and before we would say, "Oh, I'm San Carlos Apache." It's not. You didn't name your band or your clan. And that's something they didn't understand back then too. Like today.
Well, here's a good example. I was in a meeting in Phoenix in 1988 when I was a councilman, and there was this old gentleman. He was sitting next to me, and he was just started a conversation with me, and we had a presentation, and we had somebody from San Carlos. I can't remember who, but they did a song and stood up and said, "I'm San Carlos, and San Carlos, I came from San Carlos, and real proud." And then, I was sitting there smiling, and then the old white man turned to me and he says, "Hey, young man," he goes, "I really apologize." He says, "That's really not where you're from. We gave you guys that name, we put you on that reservation." Yeah. So it just really hurts my heart. He tells me, and I, that created more conversation between me and my mother, because I hurried back and I said, "Mom, this is what this old white man said." And he's right. Look, there's a San Carlos hotel downtown downtown Phoenix. There's a San Carlos in Los Angeles.
California.
Yeah. And she goes, "No," and then she goes, "God, he's right. Probably the white people just laugh at us because we just." We embrace what they gave us when we shouldn't. We should defend,
Yeah.
And that's what she used to tell me. She goes, "God, we just probably look stupid to them because we're doing what they actually want us to do, And then, that's why I said a lot of these little things in my early life really sparked me to really look at how I was going to defend our people.
Yeah. And it seemed like in the 60s, like when in that era where you were there, that's when it started coming up, like the Black Panthers and the AIM. They all started coming, and then that's when it looked like it started, when it was ready to, they were marching to the Capitol, and it seemed like from there, and that's the era you grew up in. So I think that's where it comes from too. Like just today, what, like the way our kids and your grandkids, the way they advocate and help, could have done that a long time ago in your era, probably not, but now you give an opportunity, all of us, to, get accepted for fighting for land and water.
Yeah, and when we talk about the American Indian movement, I really, in my case, I take my headband off to them for what they were doing at that time. Yeah. Because it was very much needed. Yeah. And so it had to take, I had to sit back and really understand and really take apart, why they were doing it. Yeah. And a lot of good info came out of there because they were the first ones to really reveal how the United States was playing with us, playing with reservations, playing with enrollment and so forth, and misplaced members. And, and I sat back and I really had to go through that thoroughly. And it was an eye-opener because we were being told different on the reservation. Yes. Because we had the Bureau of Indian Affairs here, we had tribal leadership that was working with them, and they were talking about prosperity. All these good things are going to come. Yeah. And we're still waiting for free electricity. Free water is going to come pretty soon. And then it was an eye opener for me for the American Indian movement to make me look at our own federal policies that were being applied to San Carlos. And so that really gave me a homework to really start breaking it down. Yeah.
And it seemed like they were trying to give us allotments back in the day. And then from there, Apache or another tribe, they can sell their allotment. And then so that, it seemed like they try to get rid of us even by doing stuff like that, but again, we're still here today, still fighting for, where our home is at.
Yeah, and it's true. I people know me. I disagree with the reservation because one, it's not our homeland. It's not indigenous to where we originated from. Number two, they never followed through with all their promises, even though we were still captive here in San Carlos. And then the programming to program our people like we always came from here.
Yeah.
And that's frightening because then we don't fight for water, air, we don't fight for the land base, we don't fight for an environment. And I get worried when our people look at the reservation line as though anything that happens on the outside doesn't affect us. Yeah. Well, it's a direct effect. It's a direct hit on us. And then the other thing is that, yes, we do have sovereignty, but sovereignty is from the bottom of our feet to the top of our head that we can make these changes, socially, educationally, health-wise. But as far as the land base itself, I mean, in our hearts, it's our land. It's our territory. Yeah. But in the white man's way, the United States own it. It's called a reservation. It's a leased land.
It's federal land.
Yeah, it's federal land. And that's why we live in the conditions that we live. That's why economically we can't grow the way we should grow. As a community, we can't help the tribe to be successful because the only one that it's geared to is the tribal government. So the tribal government has a total responsibility for everything that we do. But we got to remember that the United States created the tribal government.
Yes.
So, any white person can sit on the tribal government. I'm not saying they can, but I'm just saying that the way it's run, anybody can sit on it because, it's like a CEO and members, that looks at the economy and the value of it and so forth. So, anyway, it was really an eye-opener for me of how I grew up and, how I live today and where we're going to go tomorrow.
Uncle, when you became chairman, what year was that?
Oh, that was in 2005 when I became chairman of the San Carlos Apache tribe.
Is there anything that when you first became chairman, like this is what you being here, living here all your life and growing up here, was there any idea like what you wanted to change or you wanted to bring to the tribe when you became chairman?
Well, gosh, that's, it may be a little long answer because when I graduated from high school, I went on to college and then I came back to the Arizona Banking Academy and graduated from there. And I came home to visit just like everybody else. I came back to see my mother. And there was a job opening, and that's when I applied for the 638 accounting position for the tribal finance department. And I got hired. And like about a month after that, I applied for a directorship called the Tribal Work Experience Program, and got the job and the position. And it was working with people who didn't have their GEDs. People who fell through the crack of all different categories, from alcoholism, families, being displaced and oppressed. And, I was really thankful, but in the beginning, I was really worried because, you were talking about almost 2,000 people on the program. You're talking about another 2,000 that are home receiving assistance. And so, I just went into action that, how am I going to help my people? And so the first thing for me was to really know who they were, because again, it goes back to the different clans, what areas we came from. And that really came from my mother because she used to tell me, do you know who you're talking to? And then she used to tell me how the Tinayas and all the different clans that we have are behaviors, because everybody has a different behavior.
Yeah.
And she was telling me that it seems like today we don't know who we're marrying, and sometimes that brings problems. So she used to say it'd be like a Russian marrying a French person. You got to know their pros and cons.
Right.
And she used to tell me it's the same thing. You got to know the pros and cons because, we have different clans and we're brought up a little different. And if we don't know, that's why we have problems. And so it was a really unique time because I was able to learn that about our people. And then the important thing was when we're talking about self-identity, when we're talking about where we originated, and then I really started to learn from the people that we really didn't know where we came from anymore. And it brought a lot of worries to me that how can I make this program successful? And so I went around to the different departments and began to work with them about job placement, work with the education department, work with JTPA, at that time was Fred Ferreira. We would work on a program of how we can get our people GEDs and move them. And so I did that for about 6 years. You know, I got the job when I was 22 years old. And when I did get the job, I was able to interact with a lot of the older councilmen that were on subcommittees, and they were trying to do the same thing and, you know, wanting to move the people. And the scary thing about the whole thing, though, on the other side of the token, when it came to the employees of the tribe, we had no benefits. There was no health benefits. There were no retirement. There wasn't anything.
Yeah.
So I remember sitting there telling myself, wow, I'm really lucky that I got this job, because everybody was working till they were like about 80 years old, because there was no retirement, nothing. And so when I started to work with, again, like I said, with TWEP, it was called TWEP. And then I created this program called ROA, Rural Opportunities of Arizona, because I needed something that could really enhance what the tribe didn't have and what the tribe wasn't going to offer. So as an independent contractor, I was able to provide the things, which meant that I could talk about the culture, I could talk about the religion, you know, I could talk about what the United States did to us, and I could talk more about how the reservation holds us back. And so the program really became successful because it was funded through the state government, the state, and we were like at 98% success rate. And so I did take it on the road. I was in the Navajo Reservation in Loop. I was in the White Mountains. I was in Camp Verde. So the more tribes were trying to get my program to come to them so that we could really help everybody who had fell through the crack. But you know, again, San Carlos was very important to me. So what I did then was, by the encouragement by a lot of people, I did run for tribal council. And the reason why I ran for tribal council was because, you know, you could use the example of a pool of water not going anywhere. So if we're going to teach all our people this, then where are you going to place them?
Right.
When the unemployment was very high at that time.
We're jobs.
We're sitting between 78 to 82%. And so as a young man, you know, the challenge, you know, came to me at the age of 22. And then again, learning, you know, assessing, you know, the tribe, evaluating, and then looking at the plans that we had in place, but then looking at the people, how we're going to fit them into these categories, you know, what is real, what is not real, because there were some that were going to go back to school and some were not going to go back to school. Some had already become family members, you know, adults and having children. So, you know, it's a lot of different categories of where people sit. And so I remember this lady from Peridot when I was jogging out on the road, because I used to run a lot. Well, I still do, but I would run on the road, and she would stop me and she says, "Hey, Wendsler, you better think about running." And I remember laughing and looking at her, and I said, "I am running." Then she laughed. She goes, "No, not that kind of run. You need to run for tribal council." She says, "Because, you know, there's a lot of things that you're doing that, you know, maybe if you get into council, you can help." And then that's when I took a look at the council and I said to myself that, you know, all these benefits nobody has, and then there's no job placements. And the only ones we have is through JTPA, or again, like I said, waiting for somebody to either, God, I hate to say it, but keel over,
or pass
away, get the job, you know, or they leave, you know, and so so I challenged myself, you know, that maybe that's where I need to be. And so that's when I ran for tribal council and won at the age of 28 years old. And so that's how I got in. And so I really come from working with the social part of our people and the conditions that they lived in. And I needed to create the employment and the opportunities that we didn't have. And so that's when, you know, working with the tribal council back then in 1988 is really when the journey began of how we can, you know, use the Constitution and break out more branches within the Constitution and and create more opportunities for grants and state funds and federal funds, because the Constitution wasn't really used to its potential.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that meant was that we really had to make these committees really standing committees, like law and order, health and welfare, those kind of departments. Those kind of committees. And so I was really proud that we were able to do that, because if it was like a dictatorship government, then you won't get fundings.
Yeah.
Because it's run sort of like a dictatorship, where there's only one person making the decision. But for all fairness, you need those subcommittees to be effective. And it shows the funding agencies that the money will be spent appropriately the way it should.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my challenge when I came in 1988 to
Mm-hmm.
reaffirm and really strengthen those departments. And then from there, it created jobs.
Mm-hmm.
It created more opportunities, and it really just enhanced the tribe to grow even further. So with the tribal council that I set back then with was great, because then that's when we began to talk about retirement
Yeah.
and the health care. And really, that's when it triggered the first 401k,
Mm-hmm.
and how it triggered to where, how the people can invest, and how, like, a lot of them can look at some type of retirement. So that's when it really kicked off.
Yeah.
And then, again, going after the casino
Mm-hmm.
was another big thing, because we didn't have it at a time. And I remember flying to Minnesota and talking with them and getting help from the other tribes to establish, a casino that should play a big impact, in our development.
Mm-hmm.
And, as it was then, as it is today, then I'm really proud that a lot of the revenue that we do make that comes to the tribe, goes into supplementing programs
Mm-hmm.
that helps the people rather than it be per cap,
Yeah.
So, it's still the same way as we started back then, but it really opened up a lot of opportunities, because we had to really fix the government.
Mm-hmm.
And I give credit to all those that I served with back then who are no longer here.
Mm-hmm.
Just probably one or two are still here with me. And it was a venture that we had to undertake if we were going to keep a lot of our young people who were graduating and getting their degrees,
Mhm.
because we lost quite a bit of them.
Yeah.
Because there was no opportunities really here.
Yeah.
And then again, we put our sights on the BIA, to begin to handle them, to assure that whatever was afforded to us that we would get, and even to begin to contract some of their programs out to us. So it was an exciting year.
Mhm.
It was a year of developing between 1988 to 1992, and then fighting our water rights that eventually we got. That now the tribe has used an abundance of that money to be successful. But in that time, working with the older council people, they had a lot of worries about the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I always felt like I was very fortunate, because a lot of those leaders, from Marvin Mall, I even remember meeting Jas Stevens, Marvin Mall, Buck Kitcheon, Ed Anderson, those leaders of the time, Alan Early, Mr. Bonney,
Mm-hmm.
he was a treasurer. All these wonderful people that, had their worries that shared with me, and were really excited about, what I could do as a young person.
Mhm.
And the late Burnett Rope, out of Bylas, he was one strong person who kept me here. And I was trying to go back to college, but he was
Yeah.
like, no, stay here, Wendsler, because, you're the future, and you need to learn all this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because we're worried about the future. You need to be here. We need to, show you.
Mm-hmm. And
So that's where it really triggered for me, of what I had to do as a councilman, for Peridot, but for the tribal government itself. And then it gave me the opportunity to really explore within, what the military, the United States, did to us, and what these policies, were devastating to us, and how I, as a leader, how I needed to counter that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot bigger than I thought. It was huge, because there was
Mhm.
a lot of things that were not done that were promised.
Yeah.
So anyway, that eventually led me back to ROA, and then I came back as a councilman again, got elected back from Peridot, to really push again, for the future, as far as with the 401k and,
Yeah.
and the health care. And so when I came back, it was great, because then I was with another good council, that we began to look at the economic, development, and that's where we took control over the hospital. We moved the police department to where it is in Peridot, and even further back, we took Black River back over. We took over the police. We took over the airport.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a lot of things that we
Yes.
did between 1988, to 2005. That really prepared me for my chairmanship, because the big thing was to take over the hospital.
Yeah.
And I just remember the arguments I had in D.C. and how they didn't want us at all, but how we stood our ground, and how I would argue in Washington. And it reminded me of my mother, when she was arguing for housing. And she was the backbone of me, to really tell me that you got to really fight for your people.
Yeah.
And now today, I look at all the employment and everything that's brought. I'm really grateful.
New hospital.
Yeah, that we did that. So maybe one day they will ask me back to tell the full story. Like I was saying, we don't want to lose how we got there, because it was ugly how we got there.
Yeah.
We had to fight the United States, and there's things that we couldn't say. There's people that we couldn't talk to. And just one day, I presented the document to D.C. and I told D.C., hey, we're taking over, and I was hated after that, and but I'm really thankful too to the late Karen Key. She was a councilwoman from the 7 Mile District that really stood beside me and really helped convince the other council, that it was important that we do this, and that was taking it away from Indian Health, IHS, and everybody was so.
It had to be hard. It had to be hard for other people, because sometimes they're dependent on IHS. But and you probably had to encourage people. No, we could do this ourselves, right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
And then IHS was giving misinformation to the employees. Who were saying that if the tribe takes over, you're going to lose this, lose that.
Yeah.
And pretty much was hated at that time. But I stuck to my guns, and and just I remember some of the council stayed far from me, because how it is politically. They don't want to lose their seats, and they didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. But, I just remember, Karen Key was the one that really stood beside me and really was saying, Wendsler, I see what you're doing. It's got to be done, because I would show her the spreadsheet of what it was going to bring, and economically how we can grow around it. And I used to tell Karen that, Karen, I've been with the tribe, way back. And I sat with so many people, and I said, and this is the way we need to go, where we can become self-sufficient and independent. And the United States made the mistake by giving us self-determination, like I said, from the bottom of our feet to our head, meaning that we could make our own decisions.
Yeah.
So even though we may not have the entitlement to the land, hey, I'm going to work it, man. I'm going to get the best out of this. And we did, So now today, when I see the hospital and I see the number of employment, and and hopefully they're running it the way we wanted it to run, to have the best care for our people. And I think it is, because I go there too, and it's better than what it used to be. And just to see Native people on the board, and Native people in high positions, and that was the goal. That was the goal of the people back in the 80s, and I'm just so glad that, they installed that in me to where I wasn't afraid to fight the United States for it. So, the United States fighting me right now in Mount Graham and Oak Flats, that's nothing new to them. They know that if I'm in tribal leadership, I will always fight for my people.
Yeah. And I always tell people, it's different, how you just mentioned earlier, tribal politics is way different than regular politics, because you got to deal with, like you were saying earlier, the clan, where they come from, what area they come from. I don't think a lot of people realize that what comes into play in tribal politics.
Yeah, no, it's big, because, when I first ran for council, my mother actually scolded me. And said, do you know who you are? Do you know what the people are going to say? Do you know the people are going to criticize me because I'm your mother? And all these things, and I'm looking at her like, what? And she wasn't kidding, because as soon as I threw my name in, all of a sudden, there were people who knew who I was, and there were people who were making up who I was,
Yeah.
And it was like, you had to jump through that first hurdle, and, it was a bigger issue than I thought it was. And I'm just so grateful that, a lot of my supporters are gone. A lot of my supporters were elders that weren't really elders at that time. And because I was young, and I was like I said, 27 years old when I was running, became council at 28. But, you know, a lot of the people who supported me were like in their 50s and 60s. And I was, you know, I was real grateful, you know, that I was embraced by the older people and the older council people. And they really helped me through this to win my elections. And if it wasn't for them, it would be, you know, they probably would have just looked at my clanship and not even vote for me.
Yeah.
Because on my father's side and my mother's side, you know, we're not the majority.
Yeah.
You know, because my mother's side were Goon, you know, Yavapai mixed with a little bit of Tonto. Then my dad's side is Chiricahua Apache. You know, both of my parents were brought in as prisoners of war.
Yeah.
And, you know, we don't have that big of relationships that we have and relatives that we have on the reservation, but, you know, we make do with what we have. But it would have to take the other clans to accept you, you know. So, you know, even living on the reservation, a lot of us, you know, still face that.
Yeah.
And I guess it's just the way it is, you know, it's just something that we have to live with. And so those are things, big obstacles that I had to jump through when I was a young man. But I think what really helped me was that I was never judgmental. You know, to me, I'm the kind of person that one voice is important. You know, they've done all these things to us. You know, we can't lose this. We have to come together regardless. But we have to, you know, make sure that our priority is about why God created us and why we're here and what we got to protect, you know. And I'm just really lucky that, you know, a lot of these people embrace me. A lot of the different clans embrace me. And again, it led me to the leadership. And, you know, then, like I said, in 2005, I became chairman where we took over more stuff. And I tell you, man, I was suing the United States left and right for all the wrongdoing, and they would back out, and that's how we get, you know, a lot of the things that we have today.
Yeah, I remember you trying to do a lot of more self-sufficient for our tribe. You know, like you said, the hospital and the casino. I mean, there's a lot of things that was going on at the time, and but back then it just seemed like they gave us cattle a long time ago to start off with, and then, you know, you guys, you know, the Apaches here just kept building and building, and then when you came in, you know, it just seemed like we started to go more self-efficient then, you know, because that's the times are changing too at the same time.
Yeah, and you know, the blueprint as a leader that I was working by was really from the elders and my mother, you know, because my mother would give me an example. She would say, I mean, you know, we have all these problems with, like, say, drugs and alcohol and, you know, just other things that are going wrong. And she would tell me, she says, you know, she gave me the most easy example. She says to me, hey, son, she goes, look, she says, when a dog has its babies, there's always one that is the last to eat, but that last one becomes the strongest. All the other ones are big. But what's sad, she says, is that you take the same mother dog. If the owners don't feed the dog, the mother dog can't feed her children good. So the mother dog goes, looks for food, and gets food wherever, and makes it coming across the highway back to her kids, then gets run over. Never makes it back home. She goes, so then what happens to the kids? They start leaving the spot where they were born and began to go different places. And a lot of them will die for a lot of different reasons. Yeah. Maybe one or two will make it because the mother didn't come home. She goes, son, what I'm trying to tell you as a leader of the tribe, you have all these things here. Feed your people. Become self-sufficient and not depend on the white people, on the way they do things. If we feed your people, then we're not going to have the same problems those people have. Because if you don't feed the child at the home, of course the child's going to walk down the highway to look for food and more than likely run into somebody bad. They will offer drinks or drugs or whatever. Now they come home not the same no more. She goes, even you can watch an animal the way it takes care of its children is the way, you know, is an example, she says. So what I'm telling you now that you're the leader of the tribe, you need to take care of your people. And that's why I went after, you know, taking things away so we can become self-sufficient, have a purpose, have a reason, and then also looking, you know, at the developing of how we can create our own food. You know, well, hate to say it, but like towns and cities around us are collapsing, but we won't, and our people will always be healthy, and we will sustain whatever is to be hit to come in the future. but you got to take care of your people. So my whole format in the leadership that I was leading in the tribe was coming from that. You know, but still meeting the 21st century. You know, we still were going to be there, but with morals, you know, with integrity, and being the people that we should be.
Yeah, you're right. Because I mean, I remember a long time ago how busy Globe, Miami, all these towns were really, you know, popping, and today they're not like that anymore. I mean, especially with the mining, and you know, especially when the mining comes and just leaves these towns like this too. It just seems like that's something that these towns don't understand what you're fighting for. Don't let it happen again.
Yeah, you know, and that's what worries me about the future, because those are quick fix. You know, they're not going to last forever. You know, the devastation is going to be left there forever. You know, and that our children and those yet to be born that we won't see is going to have to deal with. And on the outside, you know, it's totally different now, because their dependency is on AI, and they forget that these things that they have come from Mother Earth, you know, and Mother Earth only has so much to give, and we really need to look at sustainability. And that's why I was saying that, you know, I looked at our tribe and Indian country, that we can lead the way to resolve a lot of these ugly obstacles that are coming, devastation that's also bringing ugliness to the land, that we could lead the way in having the answers of how to resolve that. And I still believe that the Native American people, you know, we have that, but we cannot act like we don't, you know, and we got to step out of the box. And that's where, you know, I'm doing what I'm doing. But, you know, reservations like San Carlos and everywhere else can lead the pack on this whole thing, because that's where we're going. You know, these guys are taking us to the edge of the cliff, but it doesn't mean that we have to be there with them. You know, they're going to have to turn around, and we'll be able to help them understand what this whole blessed gift of what God gave us is what it's there for, you know. And we have that, but you know, it's just, you know, that's kind of where I grew up, and how I grew up, and how I won't change, because I see that as the answer.
It seems like I know, like on a res, like we try to be like, there's some families out here that they want to be quiet because they don't want to get in trouble. Like, and so I seem like sometimes it's still like that today. Because, you know, they're so used to being oppressed that, okay, if we don't say anything and if we get along with them, we'll be fine. But, you know, coming from you and the family, I know it's not, you know, we've got to say something. We can't just say, oh, if we stay quiet, we'll be okay. No, we can't be quiet. We got to step up and talk, because if we do, then they're just going to be all, you know, they're okay as long as they don't say anything. They're okay. And I think that's something that you've been doing, has been speaking out.
Yeah. You know, I guess when I look at that too, what the Native American people, I mean, a certain percentage, you know, of course, and even here in San Carlos, is that they don't realize that they have indigenous rights. They have historical rights, and more importantly, you know, the country was taken wrong.
Right.
You know, and if you don't voice on those things, then the way the United States looks at it is that you forfeited everything. And if your children no longer knows where they come from, and don't say nothing for 50 years of their life, and all of a sudden, you know, they want to say something, you're going to lose in the federal courts, you know, because nobody never said anything. And that's kind of what you're saying, you know, why I do what I do is because this is all wrong. There's no other way you can put it. And for any person that calls themselves an American, you know, we are at the forefront because we are from here. You know, we have the right. And that's why I'm not afraid to go on the road and tell, you know, these different places and give them an evaluation of what they've destroyed and how they destroyed it, because what it was like before, you know, and they don't know what to say, because, you know, that comes from our ancestors. And so that's what worries me a lot, is that when you know, either intentionally or not intentionally, we're forgetting where we came from, and we're forgetting what rights we have. And it's kind of sad, because if you go that route, you know, being on the fence means that you're forfeiting everything. And you know, we can't. So as long as I'm saying what I'm saying and doing what I'm doing, is showing the American people that we're not forfeiting anything.
Yeah.
That, you were wrong. You owe us.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom line I tell people is that I got to keep this fight going and do what I'm doing, because if you look at the minings, the mining corporations are all around San Carlos. And that means that water is going to be contaminated, air is going to be contaminated. We're just talking about cancer. There'll be more high cancer rates. And the crazy thing about this mine, Resolution Copper, tied to Rio Tinto and BHP, who are the owners, is that they're exempt from all federal laws when it comes to the environment. So, I don't know how many people understand that, but the bottom line, that means that there's no law that contains them for any wrongdoing that they do to the environment, or where they're going to take water and how they're going to take water.
Yeah.
And so this is really devastating. And then on top of that, they talk about, America, 25% of the copper is going to stay here. But come on, people, there's a bunch of mines around us that are all operating at 100%.
Yeah.
Where is that copper going?
Yeah.
This is all about colonization, capitalism, corporations, stockholders. They do not care.
Yeah.
And so because they do not care, it doesn't scare me one bit. Because what we're standing up for is what God created the world to be, to not be abusive and to be morally about it. And so that doesn't scare me one bit. That's why I stand the way I stand.
I always tell people, like, a state park or federal land is actually native. It's native land, and reason why they create state parks, and maybe because the reason why they, Theodore Roosevelt, he protected that land, is so we won't take it back. And I feel like state parks is so natives won't take that land back. That Oak Flat was being protected, so the Apaches couldn't take Oak Flat back. So, like, and now today, like, state parks are trying to hire Native Americans to be rangers. That's kind of hiding it to say, well, why don't you just give us back that land if you're going to make us rangers of this land, But again, it's always the United States is always trying to not get us back on the land, and that's why they have state parks and federal land and things like that.
Yeah, and adding to what you're saying is that what Native people, especially those who live on a reservation, what we need to clearly understand is that, like the universities, the state of Arizona, the federal government, I mean, they know our dilemmas. They study us to know what we object to and what we don't, and then they know the divisions, that lie on the reservation. So they feed off all of that. So, like you're saying, here I am right here, we're doing the interview in San Carlos, but I'm living in Oak Flats now.
So it's hard to catch you here.
Yeah, so these two are federal lands.
Yeah.
So when I went to the United States and delivered my letter that I was forfeiting, vacating the San Carlos Reservation, and I'm going home to Oak Flats and like Mount Grant because of their negligence of taking care of the place, it really threw a monkey wrench at them, because see, they never they looked at I'll just say Apaches. They looked at the Apache wars as being over. They looked at the Apache reservations as being the work to assimilate all of us. They looked at that our children will forever believe they came from San Carlos and nowhere else. They never thought we would ever try to go back, because we got to remember that our great-grandparents went through a military war.
Yeah.
Now, what I tell people here in San Carlos when they forget is that my mother and my dad were born in the 1920s, which means my grandfathers and grandmothers were born in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Which means that the San Carlos Apache tribe became a reservation in the 1930s, which means I was born in 1959, which means I'm first reservation. So anybody born after the 1930s are first reservation. So when I look back at my mom, I said, God, she was a prisoner. And then my grandfather walked in as a child, as a war, my great-grandfather, and it just blows you away. And I'm first-born reservation, and it just blows me away when people don't look at it like that. And they don't tell their children, like my children are second-born reservation. My grandchildren are third. I mean, that's not even like long ago.
Yeah.
And then we have the attitude that we don't even
Mm-hmm.
think that way. Like
Right.
we're all Americans.
That far
like,
back.
yeah, it
Mhm.
blows me away that how assimilation has really traveled that
Mm-hmm.
fast and that quick. And so anyway, getting back to saying that there's loopholes, because what can the United States do to me when all I'm doing is setting up on another federal land?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I'm there for my religious reasons, and
Mm.
I'm telling them that they're neglecting their responsibility of the importance of care for the earth, but for all people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what can they do to me?
Mm-hmm.
As long as I'm there on their negligence, they can't do much.
Yeah.
And I mean, and then again, that goes back to me not allowing to be played by their history, their
Mhm.
words, in what they want. I'm
Yeah.
not going to fall into that propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to stick to my great grandfather,
Mhm.
dad, mother, grandmother, great grandmother. What they endured,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's why they made me.
Yeah.
To challenge what was done wrong to them.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I always say is it's not that far back, because when you mention it, like your great grandfather, my great grandfather John Nosie, and his wife were actually free. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nothing. They were on no reservation when they were born. I'm like, they were free. Like, that's not too long ago, and it goes all the way back to now. Like, people talk about the all these past history battles, but like, dude, Native American is not that far back. I mean, my great great grandfather was free. I mean, that's
Yeah.
how early. I mean, it's still recent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one day when I was younger,
Mhm.
I, you have the American history,
Mhm.
what America gives you, then you have your own oral history from your family. So I wanted to go check it out.
Mhm.
And when I was younger, got in my car, went down the road, went through Peridot, went through Bylas, went through Fort Thomas, went through Pima, Thatcher, Safford.
Mm-hmm.
Before I know it, I was right there near Wilcox, and then I was in the Chiricahuas. And I was like, man, that's just right here.
Yeah.
Just right here,
Yeah.
And then, so I went further, and I went into the Chiricahuas, and how beautiful it was.
Mhm.
How it's like another Sedona, how it's an oasis, just beautiful.
Yeah.
And then that's when I come to learn that when the people were brought here as prisoners of war and were told that they're going to live here, that this is their new home, I mean, you're kind of like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm going to go home. This is
Mhm.
not, this is like not the beach,
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
and it hit me. I mean, nothing will ever change me on that, because all they wanted to do was go home. And then so when I went back and did further research on it, Geronimo and some of the other people, like my great grandfather, all they wanted to do was go home.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went back, I understood why they wanted to go home.
Mm-hmm.
And so as soon as they made their way out, the United States hit them with the fact that they broke the reservation. They're on a war path. Watch out for them. They're going to kill people.
Yeah.
And that's when the propaganda started.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's kind of sad to say that some of our people believe those stories today, that our people broke out to start war and to start.
Mhm.
No, the bottom line was they wanted to go home.
Yeah.
And, I guess if we're going to be incarcerated, they wouldn't mind being incarcerated where they originated from.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. That could be the other side of the token. But
Mhm.
but all these guys, all they wanted to do was go home.
Yeah.
And they paid the price for it.
And when we talk about Oak Flat, Uncle, I always tell people, like, all our sacred places that we have as Apaches, there's more than Oak Flat and Mount Graham that we don't talk about, because I always think Apaches are very secretive. Like, we don't say anything. Like, we never talk about. We don't bring it up because we want to protect those things. And I feel like it's always been like Mount Graham and Oak Flat were protected, because we don't talk about them. It's just the way our ceremonies are too. We don't talk about who's going to dance, who's going to sing, and stuff like that. And so there is a lot more out there. But I'm glad that as Apaches we keep it secretive. All these things that we have, like all ours is oral history. if you listen to the songs and you understand the songs, they're in the songs. Probably, don't want to give that away. But I'm saying like we sure have a lot more here than people know about.
No, there is. I mean, there's a lot more to it, and it's just like the late Ola Casador, and the ones like Franklin Stanley and Ernest Victor, the ones I remember. We would sit down. God, this was like 1984. We would sit and we would talk about what was coming when it came to Mount Graham, and I just remember it was a really hard conversation because how much do we release,
Right.
how much do we tell? And the reason why there was those hesitations was because the fear that the American people would destroy even more so. And I know that, sitting with them late at night, early mornings when we were praying and when they were talking about, how do we keep the sacred alive?
Yeah.
How do we protect the individual soul tied to what is sacred? And that was a really, really hard discussion. And when the old people were still alive at that time, even the late Abraham Logan, he was a medicine man from the 7 Mile District, they would talk about that, if we say it and we put it down, then they're going to go after and destroy that too. And all we have left is what God gave us in that way, about what's holy and what's sacred, like what you're saying about the gone people, the ceremonial people, why we do the sunrise, it was so, it was hard for them. And I remember sitting in those conversations and then how much we're going to say and let go. And there's still quite a bit that, is still not expressed today.
Yeah.
And even with me, there's places that I will not show and not show anyone because
they might take advantage of
it. And sometimes even our own people, so I was told from the late Ernest Victor that, we have to be really careful and trustworthy on people. And that's been the difficult thing in this fight, because you just don't know who to trust. And definitely, trust the universities, trust the government, anybody. And the mine, the University of Arizona, they worked with the telescope project with the Vatican, and they chose Mount Graham because of how sacred it was and the deities, and they wanted to use that mountain to find God's creations and understand these movements that as Apaches we know what they are. And then when it comes to Oak Flats, is the same thing. The old people talked about the worry about these people digging further down into Mother Earth, and what they're going to release and what they're going to do. And so we can't tell them because we're going to show them. If we tell them, we're going to actually give them what they want. So, those are the things I live with yet that I'm not going to expose out there. And like everybody else, that will go to my grave with me. But the thing is that we don't even have to go there. It's a moral decision that we all have to make. It's understanding who God is and understanding what Mother Earth is all about.
Yeah.
That's as far as we can go. I was like the way the late Chairman Ned Anderson on the Mount Graham issue, he told, in a press conference, he told them, he says, if God intended us to see the womb of the universe, then he would have created our eyes like telescope. We're not supposed to go there.
Yeah.
And I always remember what he said, then also with what they're doing at Oak Flats, digging so far, so deep underneath the earth where nobody's never gone before, of what they're toying and messing with. And if God, gave that to us as individuals, as humans, with our own hands, then we can go that far. But he never gave that to us. And so, those were like a lot of teaching for me that I still hold dear, and I do my best, but I do share with those who, are trustworthy, that they mean well, but other than that, I hold loyal to what is sacred and what is holy, because they're after it.
Yeah. And it's something that they'll bring out, something that they'll try to make money off, or, something that they will take. Because when you talk about Oak Flat and people don't understand why it's sacred, or, why we like it. Once you go up there, once you go to Oak Flat, you're gonna know why. I mean, go to Mount Graham. You're gonna know why. I don't have to. You don't have to believe in what I believe in. Just go over there, and you're gonna know why. Especially the way the weather is and how hot it is. Go up to those places and see, and then you'll figure out why it's so special. And it's something that they need to understand.
No, I got to say,
Mm-hmm.
you're 100% right on
Mm-hmm.
that, because I tell people, I said, hey, I'm not even good looking. You didn't come here to Oak Flats to see me.
Yeah.
I said, something called you,
Mm-hmm.
something. And then sure enough, a lot of people have walked away taking something,
Mm-hmm.
that's undescribable, and only for them to understand. And that's what's sacred. That's what heals you. And Mount Graham is the same way. And all these sacred places that we talk about in this country, you have to go there. You have to
Mm-hmm.
give it time. You have to go there in a respectful way. And the Creator will definitely touch you,
Mm-hmm.
through these mountains or through these sacred places. Um, you don't have to listen to me, and
Yeah.
go back to these places. And all I'm just trying to, I tell people, like kind of like the Catholic Church. I said there's an altar boy who gets the church ready for the priests and for all the
Mm-hmm.
people to come in. I said I feel like that's what I am. That I've gotten these places ready for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's time for you to meet the Creator.
Yeah.
To have your spirit touch, and
Mm-hmm.
for you to realize that there is a spirit, there is a God, there is a Mother Earth,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not going to learn it if you don't go there,
Yeah.
and I tell, the white people that now I see what they did to you,
Mm-hmm.
because if you look at the Bible, when I sit and talk with so many preachers, a lot of their stories came from the mountains,
Mm-hmm.
from a burning brush,
Mm-hmm.
from the water. It didn't come from the church, it came
Yeah.
from these places. But now they have a church, and I said, and so they actually took the people off these very special places that God touched and put them in a church.
Mm-hmm.
And now they don't go back to these sacred places anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that the church is not special. It is special. But the point of where God really touches is where you need to go back to.
Yeah.
Because they still tell you that in your Bible,
Yeah.
where all these special places were at. It's the same thing with us.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing. These places have these deities where God placed them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you got to go there yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not Mount Graham, Oak Flats, any other place that's sacred, you have to go back there.
Mm-hmm. It's like you have to find the answer yourself. I can't give you the answer, and that's every time I talk to non-natives, anybody that don't know about Oak Flat, it's the same thing. You just got to go there. I don't know how else to explain it, but you got to go there, and then you understand why. I mean, everybody here in today's world want to hike. You know, everybody wants to go hike and do all this stuff. Like we've been doing that for years. Like now you
Yeah.
guys know how important things are, but you need to come to these places because if you want to hike Sedona, you want to hike Comeback Mountain, those things were all beautiful back then. And so, come to here, you'll see the same thing. It's just something that they need to understand.
So true.
Mm-hmm.
I look forward to, doing this, again,
Mhm.
if you wish.
Yes.
Because I think, what we say here really applies to a lot of Native people,
Mhm.
across the country, because I visit so many
Yeah.
of these tribes. They pretty much, many of the tribes know who I am. But also, the non-natives, I've sat with them in a lot of places. So I guess as we go forward, I just kind of want to end with this with you is I tell non-natives, don't get offensive, to what I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tell my brothers and sisters, natives, don't get offensive also.
Mm-hmm.
I said, as Native people, I said, we're wearing the chains yet around our wrists, around our ankles, and we feel them. And if you don't feel them, that means you're assimilating really
Mhm.
fast. I said, but you have them too, no different than me. And then I turned to the non-natives and I tell them, I said, you're standing there listening to this story or this happening right now to us and what we're saying. I said, but when I look at you, you have the same ones on.
Mm-hmm.
I said, the only difference is that you learn how to wear those chains longer than we have, and you made it a part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I said, we have all been colonized. We have all been slaves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we all have been crying for God, you know, for why we're going through this punishment.
Mm-hmm.
I said, but that's what colonization is. It colonizes you. And then it puts you in a corporate world that demands us to be their slaves, and they benefit from God's greatest gift.
Mm-hmm.
I said, so the reason why I guess I would say I have a lot of non-native people really joining the fight
Mm-hmm.
is because they've been in it a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
And they're ready. And I tell them, I wish you guys had a good leader,
Yeah.
a really good leader, because then you guys would change quicker and faster because you guys been on this. You brought it from the other side of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But to my native brothers, I'm telling them, wake up.
Yeah.
You know, this is an illusion. You know, America is an illusion. You got to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Wake up. You know, and when the mountains rumble like the way they're rumbling
Mm-hmm.
all over, and sacred sites are being under attack by corporations, you know, you have to wake up, because the white people, African Americans, can't do it without us.
Right.
And we can't do it without them,
Mm-hmm.
because there's only one God, there's only one race.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, those guys have been through it longer than we have.
Mm-hmm.
And if we make them our allies and we become their allies,
Mm-hmm.
then we have a greater chance of fighting this evil. But if we think it's just us that's going to win it, look at all of them. They all lost.
Mm-hmm.
So we learn from losing. And then from there, we know where the target's at. So we haven't even shot our last arrow. But let's be smart and all pull it together further, stronger,
Mm-hmm.
with a better target, and, you know, hitting the target.
Yeah.
And that's the way I see it, you know, and that's why I'm all over the country and doing what I can.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to be like everybody. I love to be home. I love to be with my kids, my grandkids. You know, I love to.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to do that, but no, you know, it puts me on this journey, and I got to say the things I have to say, like I'm sharing with you today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nothing of what I'm saying is made up. You know, it's,
Right.
It's the actual life that I live. So I look forward to our next podcast, you know, because there's a lot more issues to talk about, from the politics to the courts, you know, to the environment, to the religion.
Yeah.
And, you know, so whenever you're ready to have me back, I'll be happy to come back again.
It was, like I was telling everybody, you know, I created a podcast actually for Oak Flat. And because to see you all over the place, you know, this is what you do for your life. And for me, you know, I work a 9-to-5 job, and so it's like, there's one way I can help is just by creating a podcast and doing it, you know, where I can. And you're just so busy, you know. And I tell everybody, I mean, the last, you know, year has been like, who's this uncle you're talking about, you know? And I forget, and I tell people, I never called him by his name, and I said, I've only called him uncle, and I said, all my uncles, I call them that, and they know by the sound of my voice which uncle I'm talking to. I said, but now I have my Uncle Wendsler, but it's hard to get a hold of him. I said, because he's the Oak Flat and Mount Graham. I said, no, he's real patchy. He's all over the place. And but I want to say one thing before we go off. I was telling my cousins from California, they were here in town. And we were going from San Carlos to Globe. We were driving, me and my cousin Mike and Eagle and Dave, and we were driving to town. And my cousin said, man, this is a long way to town. And I said, yeah, it's pretty far. I said, you know what? When I was younger, I used to run with my uncle. We used to run from here all the way to Globe. He goes, what? Really? He goes, you guys ran this far? I go, yeah, man, we ran all... There he is right there. You're right on the side of the road. I go, no, look, he's still running. But we all just laughed because they thought I was making it up, you know, until we all saw you on the side of the road still running. I go, look, he's still there. But it was such it was funny. It was just a funny moment. And like, I think they thought I was making it up about you, and I wasn't. And we saw you out there. It was perfect timing to say, look, he's right there, you know. But it was thanks for taking the time, Uncle, for, you know, letting me come here and talk to you and finally catch you, and I'm catch you again. We'll do a part 2 of this.
All right. Look forward to it.
All
Yeah.
right.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
Thank you all for tuning in to the Fight for Existence podcast. If you guys want to keep up with the podcast in general, what you could do is follow the social media account. The Instagram account is going to be Fight for Our Existence. Again, that's Fight number 4 Our Existence. Go ahead and give that a follow. And if you guys have any questions for us, or you guys would like to be on the podcast, in the Instagram there's a link. Go ahead and click that. No matter what kind of platform you guys listen to this podcast on, there's always that plus or that follow button. So go ahead and click that so you guys can get notifications when we upload our next episode. And if you guys are listening on Spotify, what you can do is go ahead and rate the show. And if you guys are only listening on Apple Podcasts, what you can also do is write a review for the show. Thank you all for tuning in to the Fight for Existence podcast, and we will talk to you next time.